The global watch world is being rewritten in real time. And my friend Giovanni Prigigallo is one of the people doing the rewriting. As co-founder of EveryWatch, he is creating a new language for transparency, for community, and digital innovation in horology. In our conversation, we talk about how data and authenticity are shaping power, who gets access, who defines value, and how technology is connecting collectors and brands like never before. Did you ever wonder what the data tells us about the next most wanted watches? Yes, we talk about that as well. It's an inside look at the future of the watch industry. Fast-paced, global, and deeply political. You'll want to listen to every second of this episode. Welcome to another episode of Watches and Politics. Giovanni is a watch enthusiast. Giovanni is a watch collector for a very, very, very long time. Don't look at me when I say a very, very, very long time. He's not that old, but he's been collecting for a long time. And I knew very few people who have such an incredible collection of modern and new watches, but also vintage watches, which I also like. Giovanni, thank you very much for being with me here today and for accepting this invitation. Welcome to Watch.
Thank you, Eddie. It's a pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
So, Giovanni, I always like to start with a very open-ended question. And that is, where do you think that watches and politics intersect? What is that topic, in your opinion, that the two intersect?
It's a great question, and I want to start by saying that I'm a big fan of the podcast and the series that's been out so far, and I've learned a lot. So I'm new to this, a little bit new to this concept, which I found fascinating. I believe, especially in diplomatic relations and politics, timing is everything and is of the essence. When I was hearing your stories and your context on why the two are linked, what caught my attention is that it is natural that the two things are super interconnected and they go hand in hand, but it's non-obvious. So when you point it out, it seems obvious, but I don't think it's a very obvious thing. You don't immediately link the two things.
Yes, and coming from a political background, I see that intersection all the time. So for me, everything is politics. This is why I want to start with these questions to get the idea of how other people see it. Now, Giovanni, we are going to talk all about data and how that is shaping today's watch world. However, I want to first ask you a personal question, and that is, how did you start collecting? What drew you to watch collecting, and also what is your collecting philosophy?
So I'll start by the last piece of the question. What I found out, what I learned collecting over the years is that your tastes change. And also not to follow trends. By trends, I mean not like data trends, but like the trendy stuff at the moment, or, you know, when something is hot and everybody wants a thing. So for me now, I force myself to think more and deeply about what I'm buying. And my buying philosophy is mainly I try to buy always something that fascinates me. Now, having a good amount of watch is something that will get wrist time, which is a very first world problem to have. But when you have, I think, even 10 plus watches, choosing which one to wear gets tough, and you might not wear a watch for 6 months or a year, and then you put it on and say, oh, I missed this. Why didn't I wear it for so long? But the truth is, you get excited by the new stuff that you bring in, and there's certain periods where I'm particularly in love with one or two of the watches in the collection, and then I'll put them aside for a while and wear something else. So I want to say that I think about this when I buy a new watch, and my collecting philosophy is all centered around what I find beautiful and fascinating. And what I mean by that, it could be a design fascination, but it could also be a technical fascination. The concept of beauty could be both of what canonical beauty, so design and the overall looks and aesthetics of the watch, but also fascinating for its properties, movement, and so on. And what I consider, because I'm a data guy and I like numbers, is also kind of the value for money aspect of things. So I like to buy nowadays things that I believe to be undervalued, but that have a lot of intrinsic value as objects. And I know you do too. So
yeah, I like watches that talk to me, that are beautiful, as you said, and that add a smile to my face. Now, let's go then to EveryWatch. What drew you to that? Because your background is in biology and in finance, and then you're like, hey, you know what? Let me bring together watches and finance, not watches and biology, as far as I'm concerned, about
true.
everyone.
So the biotech aspect, it's a very data heavy type of business. So that's what I've worked with and that's what I've trained for. The engineering side and the biotech side taught me the data part, by which I was always fascinated. And then I've brought it together with my passion, which is watches. So how I started with watches, what got me fascinated and so on. Basically, as a good Italian, there were watches in the family. So grandfather's watch and dad's watch and my dad isn't particularly fond of watches. So he has a few, he wears them all the time. But my grandfather was much more of a watch lover and collector. Also had a collection of pocket watches, which everything got handed down to me because I was the one fascinated with that. And my dad collects pens. So he's more on that side of the fence. So for me, I got fascinated by seeing this in the family, but also there's a thing in Italy where pretty much every decently accomplished professional or entrepreneur would have a good watch. And oftentimes, also because I live in an island, I live in Sardinia. So oftentimes that watch would be a Rolex for obvious reasons, because it's the one all around watch that you can wear to the beach, you can swim with, and then you can wear also with a suit. So you see a lot of Daytonas, you see a lot of Submariners, GMTs. And so seeing them around in our close circle also got me fascinated about that. And then, of course, with the watches that were handed down to me. So that started my whole fascination and the wormhole research that took place from there. And so as soon as I had, a good amount saved up, my first love was a Royal Oak. I really wanted to buy a Royal Oak. And back then they were still cheap. Okay. But by the time I finished saving up, I was very stubborn. I actually wanted the jumbo, the ultra thin, but that was a little bit too expensive for my budget. And then I didn't want to compromise with a regular, time only. So I said, you know what? I'll buy a few watches, a few Rolexes. And so that's how I started. Rolexes were incredibly cheap back then, much, much cheaper than now. And I took this passion through school. Basically, I traveled a lot through school and the initial phases of my work. And I took this passion with me. And anytime I wanted to, let's say, get another watch or whatever, because I was in school, I had to sell something to buy something else. And that's how I learned the tricks. I had to force myself to learn more about watches because there was no mistake to be made, right? There was no budget replacement. So I was studying a lot and being very sure what I was buying and that it was good and all of that. And it was just my fascination. I wanted to try as many as possible, own them, learn about them. And that's how I got started with watches. Then by doing this, I ran into a big problem. It's really, really hard to know what to pay for a watch. There's no hard data out there that says 5 people in the last month bought this watch at this much. The only thing were a few marketplaces, but they didn't really share the transaction values, right? You could look at the cheapest comp out there, but it's not really giving you, maybe somebody bought it for half the price and you don't know, and you're paying much more. So with that in mind, that was the starting point of EveryWatch. That's why EveryWatch started covering auction data specifically at the beginning, because we really wanted to create statistics based on real sales and real transactions, what somebody's paying for the watches, and to give the best possible guideline to buyers, collectors, and even sellers out there on what's real, what they can realize, because everybody gets stung at the moment where you have to sell your watch, right? and you get 20, 30, 40% less than you think that you thought the watch was worth. So that was the whole reasoning behind the beginning of EveryWatch.
And how do you see it evolving in the watch ecosystem? How do you see the platform evolving?
Well, it's been a while since we started it, right? It's already been about 4 years, and we've been live in the market for almost 2.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of evolution, right? We started with the idea of just the auctions, then we integrated the whole vital part of the watch industry, which is watch dealers, marketplaces, and such. Nowadays, we have about 1,000 dealers and marketplaces, different ones, and about 500 auction houses, so 1,500 sources in total. And then, so we went into the watch dealers and marketplaces to basically bring together in one place all the offers that are out there. So if you're looking for a watch, you want to find the best deal, EveryWatch is your friend to go and do just that. But also if you wanna make a sensible purchase and know what to pay for the watch, that's also how EveryWatch aids the clients. And then on another side, we also do industry leading analysis of the market because we have so much data. We work with some of the leading brands. We work with some of the leading retailers, auction houses to provide them with data about their own performance, competitors' performance, opportunities, market trends, and where the market is going.
Wow, that's amazing. I usually don't sell watches, but I want to know what they're worth, and especially recently with your reports that you are publishing, you are really giving a transparency by data, backed by data, to the market, and not only closed into boardrooms or closed for brands, but also for peasants like myself who just want to know what's going on in the watch world. So my next question is about how do you think the market transparency through that data changes the power dynamics between collectors, dealers, brands, auction houses in your case?
So it's fascinating because everybody has their own angle. The way I see EveryWatch is it makes interactions between dealers, collectors, auctioneers easier. And why do I say so? Because oftentimes back in the day, let's say the auctioneer that had to give an estimate would fight with the client to get the estimate down because what the client had in mind was unrealistic. But now you can show the client, hey, look, similar sales for your same watch last year here or in the last few months. So here's the estimates. And then that's hard to argue with, right? Because it's a hard fact. So that goes back to what was missing in the industry, hard facts and transparency, right? So you as the client, you accept the information much better because it's backed by real data. Similarly, for dealers, same interaction with the client, they can motivate their pricing also by supporting it with recent sales and data. And then as a collector, you're much smarter. So the days of walking into a store on vacation, seeing something that blinks that you like, that you know nothing about, and just buying it because you're in a happy mood, a holiday, you just got your bonus and you want to splurge and you get something that you like, but you really have no insights in what's it cost and whatever. I think those days are getting rarer and rarer, those occasions, and consumers are much more educated. And I believe EveryWatch brings that transparency to these people, to the watch collectors.
From my point of view, this transparency, spearheaded by EveryWatch, it brings a playing field that is more even now, and at least we know where we are playing. So if I'm going to bring my collection to an auction house, at least I have my expectations right, so they don't have to convince me that, hey, Eddie, calm down. Your collection is not that important. Or in some cases, they cannot just play you down, or even as a consumer, because I really like to follow auctions, and estimates were crazy for some watches and that didn't make it. So there was that uneven field of play, if you may. So definitely education is a very, very important part of it. But do you think that data platform, and
in this case, we're talking about EveryWatch, but also other data platforms, act as kind of a watch authority or legitimacy engine for what it's doing?
I think without legitimacy, you cannot go anywhere, because you need people to trust your work as a data platform in order for it to be legitimate and for them to trust it and use it. Because again, if you bring your collection to the auction house and they show you that they're basing their decision on every watch, and you don't know who they are, what they do, or company, XXX, you're probably not going to take the information for good. So the legitimacy is super important. And that's why we constructed our platform in such a way that everything is out there, is transparent, and you can just show the hard fact. And there is a link to whoever sold the watch, or basically it's probably the maximum level of transparency to the degree that we can do it. So I think, yes, you need to establish yourself as a trusted source in order to give trustable statistics, information, and so on, and in order for people to rely on you. Just like what comes to mind is booking.com. Pretty much every hotel in the world is listed on the platform. And if you didn't have that feeling, you probably wouldn't be so convinced of their service. I believe that you need to establish that. I think we're still in the phase of establishing ourselves because we are very new to the market, but that's super important. That's a key element.
And do you agree that establishing that legitimacy also will act as an authority for speaking about prices, about watches, the worth of watches, and maybe even legitimizes other auction houses or other dealers that they can use that hard data of, you see, we made this estimate for these watches and we sold 90% in the range of the estimate.
Absolutely. It should be this way. What comes to mind is an easy example. There's a journal in Italy called Quattro Ruote, which means four wheels, about cars. And ever since the 90s, they've been doing these magazines where at the end of it, you would have kind of a grid that would tell you, okay, your model of car, based on the kilometers and the year, you kind of have the grid. It's worth this much, and then it kind of goes depreciating over whatever. And so it gives you a guideline on what to pay for the car, even before the internet era, where you would have all those things all brought together. And that was quite nice. They were doing probably the work manually by themselves back there, or they had some kind of formula, but that was an authority. Everybody bought cars based on that kind of fact sheet.
Because people want to take decisions from data as well. That is what it really helps. And for me, it was fascinating doing this series because watches and politics started everything with how watches are being given as political gifts. The innovation of watches and watch complications during times of turmoil, such as World War. And even if you go before that, is how political governance or political events shaped the development of watches. And then researching about it, you enter into the finance of watches, you enter into economic of watches, and you enter into the data. And it's fascinating how much data plays a role in the trends of watches and actually the trends also of watchmaking, because at the end of the day, even watchmakers, including also brands, they look at that data and they decide what to make. But what about, in your view, how does the price data influence which watches become iconic or canonical in collector communities? So among the collectors, we talked about brands, but how do you think the prices influence collector communities?
Great question. I believe that marketing and exposure is what defines the trends. I will give you an example. Rolex Submariners have been raising in value steadily, just like Daytonas, for decades. They're kind of inflation proof. They're always in demand. They're iconic. Rolex gradually raises the retail price and the market price follows. But the real icons, I believe there's a cycle to it. And one is very high notable auction sale. I'll give you an example. Paul Newman's Paul Newman selling for 17 or 18 million dollars. That every media talks about it. It even goes in the New York Times and bigger publication. And then it becomes a phenomenon and people recognize that watch and start getting interested and they want one, and that's where the price goes north. And I think you need these flagship sales and moments in time that get the talk going, and they're such notable sales that it's not just in this month's edition and then nobody talks about it anymore. It's something that imprints in your mind. Pretty much every watch collector knows about that sale of the Daytona, the Paul Newman's Daytona. I believe those moments in time are what drives the market and what drives publicity. I gave a talk at Milano Watch Week about independent watchmakers. And after some analysis of the data, what I concluded is these brands that are very small and the watchmaking business is very capital intensive, they don't have huge marketing budgets, but the auction houses do. So if you can place some of your watches in front of the right clients, the right collectors that can touch and feel at the viewings before the auctions, these auction houses travel the world with the watches before they go on sale. That's such great exposure for you and your brand that you would have to have $1 million marketing plan to buy. And it comes for free.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing it. That makes total sense, because when you see how these watches got hype, I always say, like, there's this guy that was a billionaire, and they asked him, how did you become a billionaire? So he said, oh, one day they sent me to the market to buy apples. So I bought 2 apples for 20 cents. On the way home, somebody asked me if I'm selling them, and I said, yeah, 40 cents. So they bought it. I was like, okay, good. I took 40 cents. I went and I bought now 4 apples. On the way, I sold them for 80 cents. And then now I bought 8 apples, and go on and on and on and on. And then after 2 years, my grandfather died and he left me $100 million. And this is how I became rich. So yes, you can have an increase of a particular model, or doing well, performing well, but then you need that spike, which is that grandfather that died and left him $100 million. And that is the power of knowledge, that is the power of collaborations, and the power of exposure. But do you think that data platforms can reduce the speculation or the hype, or do you think that it amplifies it?
Great question.
And you are in between the collectors and the brands. So,
well, we make these results more known. So on one side, we publicize it. But also on the other side, sometimes you have these events, these sales, but they're a fluke. More than a fluke, the right term is they're isolated events. So
very good point.
Basically, you have a very good sale and maybe 2 bidders were fighting, but the market doesn't recognize that watch at that value quite yet. And that sale by a dealer or whatever, it's not reproducible. And then what happens is that you start seeing other sales back at the normal value. And you have that one outlier. That could have been because maybe that watch particularly had a big provenance, or it was special. Sometimes, going through data of some specific watch references, you would see an anomaly. You go and see, and maybe it's a Tiffany stamped version of it, the only known or whatever, or maybe it was some important person watch, and then the value skyrockets. But it doesn't mean that all of the watches like it that don't have that provenance are worth that much. And it also happens with, for example, the very famous reference, the Patek Philippe 1518, which is the first perpetual calendar chronograph, the historical lineage, the most famous lineage and complication of Patek Philippe, we could argue. And one in rose gold sold, now, I don't want to say something that's wrong, but at least 5 years ago, if not 10, okay, 5 to 10 years ago, it sold for almost $10 million. Because it was the watch of the King of Egypt. and there was a provenance. There were pictures of him wearing it, and so on. Now today, a pink gold 1518 is still worth a lot of money. Or depending on condition, let's say around $3.5 million. But that was a $9 million sale, and that's a very important watch. So you could have the market follow just because people already love that watch, but it doesn't really happen because there was something special about that watch. If a normal perfect condition 1518 in rose gold would do the same like super high result, I think the market would follow. But because of that watch with the special provenance and whatever, it takes you to a different level, and the market doesn't follow. Even on such a special, collectible watch, they only, just for context, they only made around 280 1518s. It's a watch from the 40s, 50s, so not all of them are left, and only few of them are in rose gold, I believe 50 or less, and that one was extremely, extremely special, like top end special. So it's interesting to see this type of things, but moments in time where you have the spikes, usually they're what defines the trend.
You touched upon the watches that have stories and how those prices are affected. So my next question is, how do you guys handle the tension between algorithmic valuation and human judgment, which includes connoisseurship, includes storytelling, stories related to those watches? So you entered into that. It's your fault that I'm edging you into that.
Taking it there. I want to say that a platform like EveryWatch has to be used properly, and the data needs interpretation. Okay, that it's very customized to the single watch. As we were saying, there are very special cases. I'll mention another one. Albert Einstein, I think Longines watch, very typical watch, nothing special about it, because it was Albert Einstein's and there were picture whatever, sold for $1 million. And probably you can buy the same watch for 1,000 today in the market, right? The same model, not his watch. So you have to contextualize that, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is we bring descriptions and we give you guidance. Look, the majority of this watch is 99.9% are worth 1,000. But this one was special, and you will see in the description because it was Albert Einstein watch. There needs to be some kind of interpretation. Also, for example, maybe the last sale on record of a rare watch is from 3-4 years ago, and the market has completely changed. You can use that as a starting point, but if the market is different today and there's no data points in between, no one's fault, right? It's just a super rare watch. The last one sold a few years ago. Actually, the 1518 in steel that's going at auction this season in Geneva.
I think Monaco.
It sold.
Oh no, who?
Monaco Legend is selling it privately, selling one privately.
Okay.
One is going at Philips in Geneva. And the last sale, again, was many years ago for $11 million. And now that watch is, let's see how much it does, right? I think north of 15. We will see. But there's been a number of years where you have absolutely no valuation for that watch. And is it worth 11 million today? No. What you could do is take the price of the regular version at that time versus the price of the regular version today and see, that it's like 3-4x the value. And then you could even argue that watch is worth 30 or 40 million, not 15 or 20.
Yeah. Well, it depends where you look at from. So
but it really depends. So it's all speculation. At the end of the day, it's worth, because it's a rare object, is worth as much as someone is willing to, or two people are willing to pay for. And
in between, I wanted to ask, I've been hearing stories about hedge funds and financial institutions investing into watch collections the same as they would do with art or with wine. Is that just a rumor, or do we know more about it?
I don't know. We've been approached by a few that were looking for data. We know that a few financial institutions have accounts with us and use EveryWatch for guidance. Unfortunately, I don't know more. So it's interesting, right? Because art, financial institutions display it in their headquarters.
But there are financial institutions that don't display it; they just have them in their
They
vault,
just
right?
keep them. Yeah, actually even probably in safe ports. That's where the storages are for the most part. I'm not sure what they would do with watches. I think displaying watches it's a little bit harder than displaying art.
I was just asking because I was reading about this,
It's interesting.
and we go to events, and some of them we go together, and I didn't see this thing coming up, but now I'm reading even more that financial institutions, like hedge funds, of course, we're not talking here about hearsay, we're not talking here about secret knowledge or something like that.
What I will say is that family offices deal with that a lot. And I think what you're hearing is that private banks are starting to do that and getting into watches more and more. The UBSs of this world, the JP Morgans, they will inevitably get into watches. Why? Because the clients collect them and are interested in it.
And in New York now we have the UBS Hodinkee week going on. To what degree do you see collecting becoming a kind of soft power where those who control data influence the prestige and legitimacy? To what degree will collectors become kind of soft power?
I think it's already a soft power. You could argue that the whole financial system is backed by data and data only. There's some emotion attached to it, just like watches. I could draw the parallel between an excited trader and a watch collector. Seeing a lot of watches, that's probably the same feeling, the same excitement. So some decisions will be driven by emotion, but most of the decisions are driven by data, or at least the foundation of it. I think we'll go more and more towards that within your taste, you'll probably veer towards the, most viable option financially. Because, what I say all the time, and I think it's still a bit of a taboo in the industry because it's so emotional, right? The watches are such powerful objects. Oftentimes, the makers and it's a whole ecosystem that's really, really, really cool. What I say and what's still taboo in the industry is, at the end of the day, everybody buying watches has a budget. Budget could be 100 million or it could be 1,000, but the budget is the budget. Right? You could supply the budget oftentimes and expand it, but at the end of the day, you have a limited budget, no matter the range. So you're much better off placing the budget strategically, and nobody wants to lose 50% because at the end of the day, that impedes your collecting. It will be kind of fixed every year, right? So your budget grows, but still you're within that budget. And I think that's a key thing. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's not comfortable, but that's the foundation of decision making.
And a lot of people don't understand, and maybe even brands, they refuse to understand that it's different when you buy a watch that you are going to use. So it's just a watch that you continue using and everything. And it's different to make a collection. Why? Because you buy a watch to commemorate something, you don't care if it loses 50% of the value, 60% of the value, because
you're never going to sell it.
And you're going to use it, you want it to commemorate something important. But when you then buy watches periodically, which I think, a lot of people don't have good thoughts about us that do.
Yeah.
You don't want to constantly lose. So for us vintage watch collectors, how do you foresee the vintage and neo-vintage market evolving as digital tools, AI, and data are more adopted by collectors and the market?
I think it will be more transparent, and it will be easier to shed light on important objects, important watches that deserve good valuations that right now are extremely undervalued. There we need help from the brands to tell the stories and tell why these watches are special, but not only the brands, right? Because also us as a data platform that has to explain the data, not only provide it with reports and what we were talking about before. It's also our job to educate the consumer and point them towards interesting stuff that, as I was saying before, has great inherent value, but it's undervalued relative to other things in the market.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm just seeing that as much as this industry is growing, the watch collectors community is growing, all these tools that nature technology is giving to us, I think it's helping everyone to level that field of play, and it's helping us all to see what we can compare things to. In the intersection of aesthetics, scarcity, narrative. Where does data have the greatest influence, in your opinion, and where can it never replace human taste?
I think there are so many watches that can be defined as rare. Rarity only matters after the taste, you know?
Yeah.
Rarity matters if something is beautiful. If something isn't beautiful, no matter how rare it is, it's still not beautiful, right? So I think the fundamental thing is taste, is allure of the object. Then people with taste recognize it before others, collect it, and then data supplies the information about the rarity, and then you have the perfect mix boiling. But there's a few things that come together, I think.
And that taste is very human. Giovanni, I have a feeling that we can speak until the morning, and your stories, your knowledge is going to amaze me with every question I ask. But I want to finish with one last question, and that is, if watches are political artifacts as much as mechanical ones, what story does the shift toward data tell us about power, transparency, and control of the watch world?
Very intricate question. I think data is power. Data gives you the power to negotiate harder, to get a fair price, to, all of this stuff. So if we start with the knowledge that data is power and you know how to interpret the data and read the data, you have an incredible advantage against everyone else. And so you can leverage that, kind of like having political information. Politics a lot. It's based on information, and who has the best information, wins at the end of the day. So just like that, in collecting, you can draw the parallel that data is power, and it gives you the power to identify beautiful, rare things before others. It gives you the power to negotiate deals, and it gives you the power to identify deals as well within things that are also already established as beautiful and rare. And that's, I think, where data really empowers the collectors and whoever utilizes it in this new age of AI and tech.
And to you, who is a collector?
Tough question. To be a collector, you have to have great passion. There's different types of collectors. I think the inherent attribute is all the collectors are very passionate individuals about a subject matter. And then they express their passion in many different ways. There's people that only focus on vintage. There's people that only focus on one brand from one era, like very, very narrow specific. There's some that want everything from one specific field, every little addition, every different, marker dial, whatever, and they have the same watch 10 times over with little differences. I would say that's the highest grade of collector, the ones that are really, really crazy about something specific, and they collect in all the declinations there are. But I would say really anyone that amounts a decent number of in this case subject matter watches, and that has a passion for them, it's supposed to be defined as a collector.
Well, amazing. Everybody has a different definition of what a collector is. This is why I love to learn from all others, from all my guests, about what do they consider as a collector. And definitely passion is there, knowledge is there, power is there, data is there. And what you are doing with your company and your team is giving that power to people, giving that power to collectors, educating, because in my view, collecting is a lot about education, knowing about what you're collecting. What you're doing is a great service. So thank you very much for your work to the collector community. Thank you very much for your passion and for your friendship. You definitely love sharing your knowledge. You're not one of those that want to keep it for yourself. Being here just showed that. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to another conversation with you soon.
Thank you so much, Eddie, and I love Watches and Politics. It's early times of a very long journey for you as well. So
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Giovanni.